But at least he thought about doing that. You see? And so we're going to look at that. So it's an issue that we have. Roy, you doing all right?
I think he's trying to get.
He's not talking to me. Hey,
Oh.
that's Alan. She
Yep.
better look at it. He is. No, that's Roy. God gracious sakes. All right. Hey, how are you two doing?
That's Alice.
Can you hear me? Am I live on this thing?
You should be.
Yeah.
Now, he may have his muted.
All right. Are you ready to close out the book of Revelation?
You.
Hallelujah. I don't know about you folks, but this has been a challenge for this little man. I think Joy can tell you, it is to me is, I get through studying this thing, and you know what the word discombobulating means?
Yeah.
Well, that's exactly how I feel. I understand it, and I see what he's trying to tell me, but I walk away and say, if I were a drinking man, I would pour 2 fingers. That's what it would be. It's that way. But anyway, we finished up last time, just as we started in the 21st chapter. But there's so much in the 21st chapter that really is more than we just don't want to delve into, because verses 9 through 27 describe on what the New Jerusalem is going to look like. It talks about how many layers are in the walls and all the stones. And we'll skim all of that, and not run from it. But how many of you read out of your book from Dr. Metzger's this morning on the first part on page 129? There's 2 different opinions on scholars that I have been looking at. If you look at verse 5 of the 21st chapter, you see it says, Dr. Metzger says on page 129, and not only this for now, but this is the second time in the book. He also quotes the first chapter, the 8th verse, and you can look at that. I hope you did. God speaks. Well, I hate to tell you this. Barclay says, here is the first time in Revelation God himself speaks. He says that verse 8 was Jesus talking. All right? I mean, and what I'm trying to say to you is the fact that it don't matter.
No, it doesn't to me.
Matter. You know, God wins, and we're going to see how he's going to win in all of this. And so we're getting here. And the first part, he talks about he was sitting on the throne, and behold, I make all things. And what's really wild, if you look at the 5th verse, it says, I'm making everything new. Come in, Carolyn. Carolyn, that chair right by Lisa has been sprayed. So it's you can pull it around over there somewhere, give you one complete.
Oh. But watch my cords over
Yeah.
here.
Where do you want me?
Well, it won't
Just-
hurt anything.
I'm sorry, I'm
But
late.
it's a
You're
spray.
all
If you
right.
feel-
This day.
Yeah, I
If you
understand.
feel
This, I
scared
think
of it,
this is the chair he's talking about.
Lisa,
Pardon me?
she wants another chair, there's spray right there.
Okay.
No,
Yeah.
no, fine, which one am I supposed to take?
This
All
one.
right.
Unless you
But anyway, what
just-
he's saying is, he's saying, I'm making everything new. That's present tense, right? What it says to you and me is that God has never stopped creating. He has never held back from carrying on with creation. Because he goes on to say that and he goes on and says, it's done. It's over with. All right? I've done everything. And we're going to see all of this. But I just wanted to show you the differences in 2 scholars. One saying that this is the first time God spoke, and the other one says it's the second time. But anyway, because you remember Jesus said, I'm the Alpha and the Omega. We've heard this. But he goes on to say in the 6th verse, it's done. And that being done is he finished the work of creation. That's it. It's finished. All right? We got to realize that things our creation is still going on right now in our life. But here, as John sees it, it's done. And he goes in, he talks about it. And this is just the thing you want to think of. All things are new up until that point. Creation has been going on, and now it's over with there and done with. And he says, I'm the beginning and the end. Guess what that says? It says to you and me that it means that in the first sense that all sources and all origins of everything came from God. Everything, the beginning. And it means that God is the source and the origin even before we have any idea that they were being created. It means the point of this is, now he says it's done. The goal has been reached. We all have goals in our lives if we want to get to a certain point. And this was God's goal. This was creating to it. And we're going to see it in a little bit just what is transpiring. Because John has said twice, he said earlier in this book about seeing the New Jerusalem descending from God. And he's going to say it again in this chapter of seeing it descending from God. And it's the same picture. It is not two different times. It's the thing. He's just reiterating what he's seen. Well, here we're talking about, so all life begins in God, and all life ends in God. Now, I don't know about you, but I pray I do end in God. That's my prayer. That's my goal and what I'm wanting to reach. But think about it. If all life begins with it, that means you and I come from God, and we go to God. In other words, and so that's important for us to understand in all of this. Metzger's made a comment about that over, where was it? I was looking earlier when he was doing some of it, but he made a great thing. But it was nothing about paradise lost and paradise regained is what he's talking about. But anyway, we'll get there in a minute. But here we're talking in all of this that's our goal. The final goal, which is inevitably is where we're going to go. We're going to go to God. That's the final goal that we want to reach, and that's where we're going. And that's what he says in those first 5th and 6th verses. And in the 7th verse, seventh and 8th verse, it tells us that he who overcomes will enter into possessions of these things. In other words, he's going to say things to you and me. Mine's in NIV. It may be a little differently. But he says he who overcomes will inherit all of this. In other words, that's going to be talking about those that have withstood all of the tortures, all of the naysayers, all of the people that have tried to entice them away from that. They've done it. But he also says that if you and I get there, we're going to get to drink from the river of the spring of water of life. We're going to talk about that in a minute, because the tree of life that Adam and Eve messed up and ate from and were told not to, we're going to find he's now saying it's open to all to eat. All right? So we're seeing some great changes occur in all of this. But I like what he said here in the 7th and 8th verse. It dealt with cowardice. You know, I mean, how many of you have ever in your life been a coward? I think all of us could raise our hands and say we could. Well, he talks about cowardice, you know, in all of this, and he says that he who overcomes will inherit all of this. That means everybody that has come through all of this, like we heard about the martyrs, what they've come through, and we've heard about those that even though they didn't give up their life, they had to go through all sorts of troubles, and they overcome it. And he says that they will be able to enter into all of this and be able to drink the water from the spring of life. And he says that I will be your God, realizing this, right? And you will be my people. He's saying that. You will be my daughters. You will be my sons. I will be your God. We will be together. We're going to talk about in a minute that the ability of seeing God face to face. And that's, think about that for just a split second. When we talk about this, though, but he says the cowardly, and he goes into the lead talking about the unbelieving. How many people do you know are unbelievers? And all of us think that we've got a chance, right? Guess what? There is to a point. After that point, there is no return. How many of you made flights on airplanes and realizing you're in a destination from San Francisco to Dallas, and there is a point of no return? You're closer to Dallas than you have been to San Francisco. Well, guess what? There comes a point where God is going to say, okay, but now there's a point of no return. You've gone too far. You can't come back. Jack, can't take you back, all right? And so we're here. And he talks about those that are vile. He talks about those that are murderers. He talks about those that are sexually immoral. He talks about practicing magic arts, sorcerers. You know, he talks about these things, and he talks about idolaters. That means people who worship other idols, all right? And then he brings up one that I think is interesting. He says, all liars. Now, why did he say liars? You know, and you look at this and you wonder in all of this, the things that are there. But it boils down to the fact that unbelievers are those who refuse to accept the gospel of Jesus Christ. And there are those out there. And there's going to come a point where you choose for yourself, and it's a cutoff. If you haven't chosen to accept it, then bye. You go to the lake of fire. You know, that's where it's going to happen. And then he talks about the polluted are those that allow themselves to be saturated by abominations of the world. I thought that was an interesting way of describing it. And then he talked about saying murderers. That's those who have persecuted, all right? Now, really, these murders are not just murders of individuals. These are murderers who persecuted Christians and caused their death. This is one of the things that's there. And then he talks about, because let's think, how many times have Christians been slaughtered? Rome slaughtered them like crazy, all right? And so we've seen that. We all know about being fed to the lions and all of this sort of thing. But he talks about fornicators. What is your definition of that? Now, this is not a Quaker meeting. You can speak. It's those who live in immorality. That's the fornicator. And that's where they're talking about it being there. And he talks about these idolaters. He talks about the liars. And the liar part of this comes out and says to you and me are those who are guilty of untruth, insincerity, all right? Ooh, that really gets close, doesn't it? Falsehood of speech, and silence, which is also a lie. Think about that. That's tough. Because a lot of times we think that it's best to keep your mouth shut, right? And open up and let everybody understand how dumb you really are. But the fact is, he says that. Because he's talking about those that are disloyal. He's talking about those that are immoral. He talks about superstitions. How many people do you know that are extremely superstitious?
I know some.
I was walking the other morning, and guess what crossed my street right in front of me?
Had to be a black
A
cat.
black cat, all right? And I said, well, that's good. He's a pretty cat. I just kept on walking. I'm not going to get hung up in that, but there are people that won't do that, all right? Joy and I had a very good friend that if there were 13 people at a table, she would get up and leave. Because you remember, how many were at the Lord's table?
12.
There were 13.
Well, yeah, counting Jesus.
That's right. Jesus was there, so the 12. So she would leave. She didn't like, and that was part of her hang up. But it's also those who worship false gods. It's also the shuffling and baffled insincerity that we have in life. We're going to be judged for that. All right? And these are things which gain the condemnation of God, and that's what it's about. Now, the city of God is getting ready to come, all right? If you look at the 9th verse and go through yes?
The last two words before you go to the 9th verse.
All right, the last two verses, 8th verse. This is the second death. What is the second death? Anybody?
First
Come on,
time
don't
is
be
the-
bashful.
I read that.
I did too. I think wasn't the first time when you actually
The
die
second
in the
death
flesh,
is a spiritual
and then
death,
the spiritual.
all right? Now, we're going to die physically, right? But the second death is a spiritual death. In other words, he says that in there. Of those that go into the fiery burning sulfur, this is the second death. In other words, their spirit, they're spiritually dead. It's over. Does that answer it for you?
I just wondered if I was looking all maybe I'll die before all this happens.
She said maybe she'll die before all this happens.
Yeah, but does that mean everybody's responsible?
No. Some of us are not going to see the second death.
We
We're
hope
not going to
not.
die spiritually.
We hope not.
Well, I pray we don't.
I don't plan on it.
So that's where we're looking at all this. And so the lake we've looked at before, but it's realize what a spiritual death is? It is a permanent separation from God. It's kaput. It's over with. You're gone. It's there. And that's what it says in all of this. And so we really realize. In the 9th verse and through the 27th verse, he is describing the city of God. And he goes into great detail in all of this because he brings back another character. He brings back the angel, the 7th angel that had one of the bowls of the 7 plagues, all right? And he brings us back. This angel says come, I'll show you the bride, the wife of the Lamb. And he carried me away in the spirit to high mountain. What did he take him away through before? He didn't take him in the spirit to high mountain. He took him out into the horrible parts of the world. And so he's seeing a new thing. And then he showed me the holy city, Jerusalem, coming down from out of heaven from God. And what he saw earlier that he talked about is the same scene, okay? It was not 2 incidences of seeing the New Jerusalem descend from God. And it was had very high walls. Look at all. If you get in there and there's precious stones in here that things are made out of. I can't even pronounce.
I had to look them up.
I had to look them up constantly to read them and know what they were. But the gist of it is, and I want everybody to think about it, when we look at all of this, there's a high wall, there's brilliance, there's the precious jewels. There was this great wall with 12 gates, with 12 angels at the gates, and on the gates were written the names of the 12 tribes, all right? So this gets to telling us some things about what does all of this really mean to us when we understand and get to thinking about it, realizing that no one can for certain say how much of the symbolism in this verses of this chapter stand for. Every interpreter will take their own literary license to do what they think about it and for the truth from it. But the same angel is the bearer, all right? We have the same angel. And so we're reeling of this. If they are charged with the message of doom, see, angels had a great job to do. Did you realize that? One of the things angels did is God gave them a job to do. Whether it was go and take doom to someone, they went and did what God instructed them to do. But if God sent them to give glory and help someone, then that was that part. They got to do that. So angels, without a question, did what God told them to do. And so they were charged with the message of it all, and we get to thinking about all of this. And so when it says what everything was, realizing that we have all of this, the places, it's the size of it, when you get talking about it listed here, is 1,500 miles cubed. You realize what that means? Now go back and think about it, all right? Now we're getting to see the New Jerusalem. It's 1,500 miles wide, it's 1,500 miles deep, it's 1,500 miles tall, all right? So it's a cube. Where does the cubism come from? Now what you're getting to see is the gates are going to be open, and there's going to be nobody, they're never going to be closed. So everybody can go. What's right now in Jerusalem, in Judaism, if you remember, the Holy of Holies was cubical, all right? It was a cube. The only person who could go in there was the high priest, and he could only go once a year. Now, what we're getting to see in New Jerusalem is this thing is built like the Holy of Holies. It's the city, all right? And so we have this, and these 12 gates that lift in there, that means the universality of the church. In other words, you got gates on the north, gates on the south, gates on the east, gates on the west. Depends on where you come from and what you're bringing, and the gates are open to you. And so this is an idea that's there. And so there are 12 of them that have the names of the 12 tribes on it. So that tells us that God is opening it up to everybody, and it's open to us all. And so what we're looking at, one of the gates there have the 12, and that means the 12 tribes. In one read, you look at it, means the continuity, are you with me? The continuity of the church. And so God, who has revealed himself to the patriarchs, is the God who also, and far more fully, revealed himself through Jesus Christ to us. And now, once we get there, we're gonna see him face to face. Now, how many of you gone for interviews for jobs? Now, guess what jobs are being done? They're being done on the computer. You have a face-to-face, sort of, but you are at this, so it's Bible type thing, all right? But before, when you had a job, you were called into an office and you sat down and you looked at the individual face to face. And this is what we're gonna get to be able to do with God. Because before, when a king was coming about and a king was saying something to you, what did everybody do for the king? They bowed down and wouldn't look at the king. This one says, look me in the eye, look me face to face. We're gonna see each other. We're gonna know each other. So when you get to thinking about these, 3 gates on the north, 3 gates on the south, 3 gates on the east, 3 gates on the west, and they're coming about. And the God of the Old Testament, that what we're finding out, because the dimensions of the Holy of Holies is coming to us from the Old Testament, and that's the God that was there, is going to be the God is the God in the New Testament as well. And so we're looking at this. So the east is a place that, what comes up in the east?
Sun.
The sun, right? And if you're lucky enough, you could have seen Neowise, but you could look at it in the afternoon, in late evenings now. But anyway, and then they were there, that was the sunrise. It's the beginning of the day. So that was a new beginning, all right? And then goes to the north. What's to the north? I don't know about you, but I think of cold when I think of
Cold,
north,
yeah.
right? So everything coming from that is north, it's cold, it has a certain chill in it. And those who come to Christianity, those are the ones, believe it or not, would you believe those who are classified chilly? And I don't mean the stuff that you eat, right? It means being cold. Are those who have the intellectual ability and exercise of thought, right? And that's, so they're, if you've ever said many times, chill it out, that means stay with it. Those from the South, now think about this for me, we're all Southerners, right? I guess we all are, I presume. And being Southerners, we come from the warm climate. That may be why Corona's going crazy in this part of the world, I don't know. But the gates could stand, this is just something to think about, for the way in the holy city of those who have come to Christ through their emotions. Do you realize that we Southerners are classified emotional? Have you ever thought about that?
I've heard it.
Well, think about it. Have you ever lived up north? And ever noticed that the difference in neighbors in the north and in the south? Everybody knows everybody where I come from. I want to know everybody, but I've been up north, and they don't even want to know who you are. They don't even want to speak to you. And so that was one of the things that's there. But this is just a thought that I'm throwing out, and it's not only mine, it was Dr. Barclay's as well. But those 3 gates to the west is the land of setting sun, the dying day, the evening, the setting sun. And those who came to Christ late. It came late. It was, you don't have to get in on the ground floor. The gates is open, so they came late. And in the evening of their days, and they journeyed. It was not likely that these were the thoughts in the minds of John at the time he was writing this. I'm throwing in some things that I know he wasn't. But none may forbid us to find him there. We can look at him and see what we were. So now we're looking at, here's this city, 12 gates, 1,500 miles cubed. That's a big city. You realize how big that is? That's a long way off. As a matter of fact, it would cover, I read somewhere, I'm trying to remember exactly where it was, what it covered, the distance it covered. 2.25 million square miles. That's a big spot. As a matter of fact, it would be the point of thinking it would stretch from London to New York. That's big. That's one city. Right? And so, but it it would be like a renovated Jerusalem would reach all the way to Damascus. That's how large this area is. And so, but it's symbolism. In other words, what's between London and New York but Atlantic Ocean, right? So it's a symbolism type thing that we have there. So we're apt to limit, when we think about it. But there is, one of the great things in all this is there's room for everyone. The only reason you're not there is you're choosing not to be. I didn't ask for it. I didn't ask for it. Siri heard me talking. So she said one moment she couldn't find my answer. I wasn't talking to her, but she heard me. But anyway, and so here we are, and we're looking at this. This holy city is not only square, but it's a perfect cube. And it goes on to think about it. And we're looking at the symbols of perfectionism in all of this, or perfection. We realize that we have what was happening to the Greeks. The perfect shape was a cube. That was the perfect shape. It was same with the Jews. That was a perfect shape. The altar that they burnt on had to be a cube-shaped altar. Right? Now our altar upstairs in the sanctuary is almost cube. When I first came here as your pastor, I looked and I thought I had to look at it twice. It is a little longer than it's deep. All right, so. Anyway, but it's close. But anyway, that's one of the things there. But the most important of all, if you remember in Solomon's temple, if you also remember in the synagogue, the Holy of Holies was a perfect cube. And that was the way it was made. And there's no doubt at all to me that this symbolism about this city of Holy Holies is there. We noted the dimensions of the city. All right, we've gone into all of that. But strangely enough, here we have to think about it. The heavenly city, there is such a vastness of space that there's room for everybody, for all, right? And it's there. In other words, I have a feeling it's wide enough that we can even social distance it. So anyway, it's 120. But the wall sort of throws me a curve. Here we have a city of this size, but then we have this wall. It's only 144 cubics, which is 266 feet high, all right? It's not very high. Matter of fact, the wall around Babylon was 300 feet, so it was taller than this wall. And the wall on the porch of Solomon's temple was only 180 feet. So in comparison between the heights of the walls and the size of the city, again, it's symbolism, and we don't want to go into it. So the wall cannot be defended, but does it need to be? Is the major question. Can it be defended from hostile beings and from spiritual things that are people that got all of this that have been liberated and cast into the lake of fire? So we don't have to worry about them too much. But the only thing that the wall can do for us as we look at it is that it puts a delimit. In other words, I don't know if that's a good word or not, is it? In other words, a delimit, a limit goes this way, but you delimit the area type thing in the city, and so that's where it is. And so God in his holy city that John is telling us is descending from God, from heaven. God in his holy city is much more eager, though, to bring us in than to shut us out. But you all know he's always chasing us, but we have to turn around and grab him. All right? And so this is it. So then we get into all the precious stones, talking about all the gold. Can you imagine gold being so bright that it looks like glass? No, that's pretty pure, when you think of that. And it goes, and it may be that John is trying to tell us what he saw in Herod's temple. I don't know. But I do know that we have a city that has 12 foundations. And each foundation is built of a precious stone. And we have this going up there, and there's these vast things that the city of God, these foundation stones were, as I say, were all precious. And you saw the first one, we talked about jasper, and we've talked about, there's gonna be a whole group of them there. And some of them you can't even pronounce. I have not been able to find them because I don't think we even find them much anymore. I think they're almost as rare as the rare earths that we have to make these cell phones work. Right? And so we're there. But what I want us to think about, if you look at them and look at the zodiac, all right? How many of you love to check the zodiac
Know
and see
about
about it? All right? But if you look at the zodiac, the first part of it is the ram. Well, the ram is, the stone for the ram is the amethyst, which is the last one listed. So everything is in reverse in the zodiac compared to what John has put here. That's just a side issue. But noted the fact being is out of those 12 stones, 8 of those stones, all right, if you go back and look at scripture in Exodus, the 28th chapter, the 17th verse, the breastplate of the high priest had 8 of those stones in it. And so we hear this. There's a lot of people that get all upset thinking about the opulence of it all. And John is making it bigger than Rome was and all this sort of thing. But you know, there's a curious point in all of this. But to me, the opulence is not there. It's just God showing what is really available in His world. This is what's there. You know, the staggering use of. Have you ever seen a pearl that would make a gate?
No. That's a
But
big
it says
clam.
that the gates were made with a giant pearl. I don't want to see the oyster.
I don't either.
And so it's here. And the gates of the city consist of a vast pearl. You got to realize gates of pearl are strictly a symbol of unimaginable beauty. That's what it amounts to. Did you realize that when John was writing this, the pearl was more valuable than the diamond? And so they go to see how things have changed. But and it also gives us understanding of unaccessible riches. In other words, this is what's there. So if you get down to verse 22, you're finding out that there is some other things to look at here. In the 22nd verse, it says like this, and I'm going to read it to you right quick. I did not see a temple. Did you read that? Do you understand why there is no temple? All right? It goes on, and he's given us all of this foundation and the description of the city and what it's like, but it doesn't have a temple. Why?
It's all temple.
Oh, go ahead, speak up.
It's all temple. All of it is temple.
Well,
Or all of it
listen
is.
to this. Listen with me for a minute. It's not, the temple's not there because God's presence is there. When we go to church on Sunday and we go into the sanctuary to worship, what do we feel that we are? We feel that we're in the presence of God, and that's where He is. Well, God is everywhere, but the Jews realized, to them, God's presence was only in the Holy of Holies, which the high priest could only go in on one day out of the year. But now this is open, and this is not a temple. You don't need it there. God's presence is among the people, and it was the primary place of worship. So no temple is needed in this new city that's there, because God's presence will be everywhere. He will be worshiped throughout the city, and nothing will hinder us from being with Him. That's the exciting thing. And he goes on to say, in the 23rd verse, the city did not need the sun or the moon to shine on it, and the glory of God gives it light, and the Lamb is its lamp. In other words, I preached a week or so ago on light upon our path, the lamp upon our feet, and this kind of thing. And this is what it was. So the nations will walk in its light, and the kings of the earth, they're going to bring gifts. All right, they're bringing gifts, he says here, to all of this. And so when we're looking at all of this, God is indeed the light of those who have dedicated their lives to Him. And that's what we're getting down to. When you realize all of this, I got to thinking about this, the Holy of Holies, get to thinking about where God is, right? As I said earlier, God's in the church, right? There's a presence of Christ, and there is the church. And the building does not make a church, does it? The liturgy does not make the church. The form of government that we have does not make the church. The method of ordination that we do in ordaining our ministers doesn't make the church. The one thing that we must understand that John is saying to us here is the one thing which makes a church is the presence of God and Jesus Christ. That's what makes the church. It isn't our doing. It's God's doing. All right? And without, there can be no such thing as a church. If you don't have that there, it's, it's just one of those things. And so, the city of God needed no created light. And he's there. He and Christ are there. They're the light. They're going to be the light of it all. And so it's there. And if you remember, the psalmist said, "In thy light we shall see light." In other words, and so it's part of what we're there. So indeed, it's those that are educated, that are dedicated to it. But if you look at a little further in the 24th through the 27th chapter, here's a picture of universal salvation. The 24th through the 27th says those things, that the nations will walk by its light, and the kings of the earth will bring their splendor into it. And on no day will the gates ever be shut. There will be no night there. The glory and honor of the nations will be brought into it. Nothing impure will enter it. Uh-oh. What's going to happen to us? We're going to be purified before we get there, right? That's what I'm praying for. And then so we have to look at this. And nothing impure will enter it, nor will anyone who does what is shameful or deceitful, but only those whose names are written in the Lamb's book of life. That's what we're looking at. And so the whole earth is for God. And this picture of the king's coming, that's universal salvation. They're bringing their gifts to God, like you and I put our gifts in the offertory every Sunday, all right? And so that is so realizing God created the Gentiles, as one guy said, to be fuel to the fire of hell, but that's not really what God created the Gentiles for. We have people that think that way, but they're there, and it's not a part of what we're trying to understand. But realizing all of this, as we look at this, when John pictured the nations there in the 28th verse, 27th verse, coming up and saying, they're coming into the light of the city of God. And it's never closed. The gates never close. They're open. Right? What do you do at night when you go to bed? Close your doors and lock them, right? And you probably have also hit the lock on your cars and had your cars locked. Because why? We realize that it's not a safe place in a lot of times. Here is a different place. The kings are bringing their gifts, and he was foretelling the consummation of hope, which was always in the hearts of the greatest of countrymen. There's always hope there. And so, more than once, as we see John write all of this, there has been no night in the city. And here is a simple and very human promise. This is a promise that came from God. And so it was there. There would be no darkness. In the new world, the frightening dark will be no more. How many of you are scared of the dark? You heard I said scared.
The dark.
That's right.
And so, and we really are at times. Why?
But you can't see what's going on.
We can't see. That's correct. That's the major issue. And as I said before, and just recently, I don't know if it was in one of my writings or if it was in sermons or whatever it was, the fact being is, you ever gotten up when the lights have gone out, the power's gone off, and you realize that the air conditioner's cut off, the fan's not working, the lights are not working, and you say, well, I gotta find out what's going on, and I've gotta go get my flashlight, and invariably, what do? You bounce into something because you think you know where it is. And so we're not gonna have that. But here's a wonderful thing I want to think about. In human history, there has been progression forward by retrogression. Are you with me? History has always been an affair of mountain peaks and valleys and troughs and waves. But in the new age, the darkness will be gone. And there will be nothing but light. How do you sleep when there's nothing but light? You lived in Alaska,
Very well.
where they have
For 2 weeks.
the land of the midnight sun. And when you think, you know, and you have to shut down, or have to have real shutters, real calm drapes on your windows to keep the sun from, so you can sleep, and it's midnight, right? Well, think about this. There's gonna be no, there's that. And then, think about that a little bit. That's now. In other words, if you and I are looking at this, and the fact being is, the age of darkness, that age where civilization was in its highest, has been followed by an age when the world was plunged into war and darkness. All of us have been through that. All right? Those of us that lived through several wars now can tell you that what plunged us into a dark area. But the wonderful thing about it is, John speaks of ancient prophets repeatedly speaking about the honor of God. In other words, the prophets have honored God, right? Well, it's true that the nations did bring their gifts to the church and to the cross. That's what John is saying out. Well, believe it or not, the Greeks brought the power of their intellect. Can you see this being done? Bringing the Greeks in because of their intellect, all right? And remember what Plato said? Plato said, the unexamined life was a life not worth living. So the Greeks were intellectual, right? That's where that came from. And it is to the Greeks that you and I owe theology. Did you know that? The Greeks are the ones that got us really looking into our beliefs. Why do we believe in Jesus Christ? So they're the ones that brought it. The intellectual presentation that you and I have today in the Christian faith, we can give thanks for the Greeks, because the Greeks wanted to know more about it. They wanted to go in depth. That's why we go to seminary and we do the things. That's why you come to Bible study and study the book of Revelation. You're wanting to get more knowledge about it, and the Greeks gave us that. And guess what the Romans gave? Here we are. He talked about Rome. We talked about Babylon. He talked about the whore. He talked about the harlot. He called it everything imaginable, all right? But from the Romans came the greatest jurists, you know, and the greatest experts in government that the world has ever seen. So guess what we got from them? They brought us the ability to administer, all right? They brought us the ability of being organized. What is the worst? What happens to you sometimes when you, all of a sudden you get in the middle of something, you realize you don't have it organized? How many of you know people that they are so organized, it's absolutely drives you crazy being that organized? But that's what they brought to us. And the chapter ends, 21st chapter ends, I think, with a threat. Did you realize that? Listen to this threat. Nothing impure will enter, nor will anyone who does what is shameful or deceitful, but only those whose names are written in the book of life. In other words, that's a threat. But it's also a promise when you realize this. I mean, think about it. Those who will not lay aside their evil lives, who want to give away their ways, they're barred from the city of God. Had you thought of your God being like that? Because why? We're looking at it from Jesus Christ. But as we come through the book of Revelations, we've seen the crucified Christ becoming the conquered Christ. He's the conqueror. He's the one that rode in on the white horse. He's the one that his robe was dripping with the blood. All right? It had his name written on the hem of his robe. It was him that was coming there. And so the person who is quite deliberately and with open eyes continues to sin, you're not going to get to it. That's the threat that's there. The promise, though, is that it is not the repentant sinner that is barred, it's a defiant sinner that is barred. And we've seen people like that in our lives, and so that's where we are. The last chapter is chapter 22. Any thoughts on the 21st? Now let me back away from you because I want us to get through all of this today. Anything from you, Roy and Alice? Y'all asking, or are you just going to be quiet and be real Quakerist over there, right? You're going to have meditations instead of conversations. All right, that's all right. We can go from there. But as the description has been in chapter 21, the exterior of the holy city, we're now going to see the interior of it. In other words, I want you people who love to do interior design see the design that God has created, all right? First, the river of life. It's a picture of the river of many sources that we found in the Old Testament. It was there, and it was back in Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. It was there, and it tells us about those things. It says that on the 22nd verse, the 22nd chapter, it says that, let's place my notes here. Here it is. Got blown away when I was answering that phone from Siri. And the angel showed me the river of water of life, clear as a crystal. How many of you have been in the mountains and seen crystal clear streams? Right? Now, one of the things happened is on my walk recently, I noticed that somewhere the creek that I crossed that runs beside Hughes has always been clear. And then all of a sudden it was dirty, it was muddy, so something got into it. But now it's clear again, it's back there. But he's talking about this, and he talks about it's going to bear crops. Can you imagine a tree that gives out a different fruit every month of the year? And you can take from it, and he says, go and eat from it, and you can drink from water from the spring of life, and you'll be able to do that. No longer will there be any curse, none whatsoever. And they will see God face to face in his name. Guess where your name's going to be? On his forehead, on our foreheads. Now, I don't know, how many of you, all of us are baptized, right? The baptism that you and I get is a symbolism of what God does for us, but in a lot of ways, it's God putting his name on us, right? Now, I don't know if any of you ever remembered that it used to be a black light. You could write something on your equipment, and it could only be seen with a black light, so if anybody stole it, you could always get your equipment back, right? Well, God is the only one who can see the marks on us. He's going to be the one to be able to see his name written on our foreheads. And there will be no more night, and there we know there will be no night for need for it. And they will reign forever and ever. And the angel said to me, these words are trustworthy and true. So write them down, John. He was saying, here's what you need to do. And so we see this, and we talk about it. And we get a little closer looking at what John is writing about. He's bringing out a lot of his own understanding, his own knowing from reading the Old Testament, because the New Testament was not all there yet. And so the picture of the river and the water and of the fountain of life it's deeply impressed throughout Scripture. It's there. H.B. Sweet said, identify the river of life with the Spirit. In other words, that's what it amounts to. One of the baptisms you get when you were baptized, then not only were you baptized with water, but there was a laying on of the hands, and that's the baptism of the Spirit. In other words, that was one of the things that's here. So we're seeing this come about, and he goes on to talk about the beauty of holiness. No longer will there be any accursed thing there. It's hard to imagine, isn't it? I mean, and it's hard for me to grasp and wrap my mind around it. And it's sort of there. So this tree of life, the tree that gives life, is part of us. If we eat from it, I was thinking about it today. I walked into the kitchen and went in the refrigerator and pulled out a plum. I'm not Tom Thumb, but I pulled out a plum. And I was eating from it, and I was tasting it was sweet. And my thought was, when I was doing that, is that what the fruit tastes like off the tree of life? Is it this sweet? Is it this juicy? Does it have this much flavor, this much aroma, this much feeling of good taste? But the tree of life, it gives many and varied fruits. thinking about that, you realize it symbolizes for us that God is giving us a life that's a special fruit and a special grace that we have. So when you realize that we get a chance to eat there in the midst of the city for all to take, you can just go eat. It's not forbidden, nor are its fruits confined to the Jews. It's open to everybody. And so we're there. Only thing that we have to realize is only in the Spirit of God can the wounds and the breaches of all nations be healed. And this is the healing effect of it all. That if you realize the water that runs through the river of life, the tree of life, this is the healing. This is what comes. And so we see the beauty of the holiness where it goes on and says, no longer will there be cursed things there. The throne of God and the Lamb shall be in it, and his servants shall worship him and shall see his face. That's the part that we need to understand, is that we will see his face, and seeing his face gives us an opportunity we haven't before. And as we coming there, Jesus is coming. If you look in all of this, when the final words are coming in verses 6 through 9, they're coming and bringing us this thing. But before we get there, it is in Christ that we can see God. That's what John is really saying to us in this chapter. We can think about all the symbolisms that's here, but what it really comes out and says, the fact being is, we can only see God through Christ. And it is his merit alone that you and I can enter into the presence of the living God. Because remember, Christ said, what? Only through me can you get to the Father. Remember? So now John is bringing that out to us. And so the sight of God produces two things. Well, what would happen to you if you saw the sight of God?
I wonder if I'd recognize it.
I'd probably do like John. I'd probably fall down. Right?
Yeah.
And like you do with the angel. But there are two things. It produces a perfect worship. All right? When we see God, it's going to be a perfect worship. And it's also going to be a perfect consecration. He's going to bless us with such a thing. And so the inhabitants of this holy city will have the mark of God on our foreheads, and the mark will show that we belong absolutely to God and are his forever and ever. That's what he says to us. And once again, John returns to the visions that he had of the city of God. You know, there can never be darkness there. As I said in one of my writings, reading my sermons, when I walk in the morning, and I noticed it again this morning, there are less street lights burning right now than there were before the pandemic came on. And I don't know if the lights have burned out and they haven't replaced them, or they've cut them off to cut down the use of amount of wattage. I don't. But anyway, we're seeing this, and so once again, John is there. And the vision ends with the promise that the people of God will reign forever and ever. And at last in God's service, okay, we will find our perfect freedom. And we're going to sing that song. Praise the Lord, free at last, all right? And we're going to be there. And with perfect submission to him, in doing that, you and I will find true royalty. We are royal, all right? Because as I wrote in my article a way back, that a big portion of men in Europe and England are of the same Hello Group chain as King Tut. Did you know that? So a big portion of those men are the same chain. You know, so we could all be loyalty. But the thing is, ours goes back further than that. Ours goes back to the beginning. So here we have, in the very ending of it all, thinking about 22, 6 through 9, where John in the 8th verse says, I, John, am the one. We'll pick back up to the 7th verse, because Metzger makes a comment about it. We're getting ready to see the two final beatitudes of the blessings that are coming. We see it in the 7th verse where he says, behold, I am coming soon. Now, that means Christ says, I'm coming, right? Blessed is he who keeps the word of the prophecy in this book. All right? That's one. That's a blessing. That's a beatitude. That's it. There were 7 of them in the book of Revelations. Just like if you go back and read the Beatitudes in Matthew, you will find them there as well. But here we have it. Blessed is those. And so I, John, am the one who heard and saw these things. And when I heard, saw, and seen them, I fell down to worship them. And the angel again says, don't do that. Get up. You know, you're just like me. And worship God. And then he told me, do not seal this up the word, all right? Don't seal it up. Think about that. Are you with me? Do you remember where it says seal it? Go back and look. In Daniel, it said seal it, all right? In other words, we would, you know, so it would never be out. Again, seal it up. And so here again, it says, do not seal it. Leave it open. Let it be there. And so we're having that done. Behold, I'm coming soon. My reward is with you, and I will give to everyone according to what he has done. Uh-oh. I'm not sure what my gifts are going to be. All right? But he says, I'm the Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last, the beginning and the end. And then he goes to the 14th verse, and he says, blessed, that's the 7th beatitude, that's the 7th blessing that comes about in the book of Revelations, are those who wash their robes that they may have right to the tree of life. In other words, here we have, remember Adam and Eve, they messed it up. They were barred from access, and now we're going to have access too. In the 15th verse, I want you to think about it when I read it. Outside are the dogs. The dog lovers probably don't like this comment, all right? But this classification of dogs is those who practice magic art and sexual immoral and murderers and idolaters and everyone who loves and practices falsehood. It's sort of repeating it, isn't it? Saying to us, did you hear me the first time? If you didn't, listen to me then. And so I, Jesus, have sent my angels to give you this testimony for the churches. I am the root. Remember, he came from the stump of Jesse, the root of the line of David, the offspring of David, and the bright morning star. Now, think about the bright morning star. Where have you read that one before? Remember when we studied Peter? In the 2nd Peter, the 2nd chapter, the 19th verse, he talks about Jesus being the bright morning star, and that's where it comes back again to see us. And the Spirit of the Bible said, come, and let him come. And I warn everyone who hears in the 18th verse the words of prophecy of this book. If anyone adds anything to them, listen to this. God will add to him the plagues described in this book.
No thanks.
And if anyone takes words away from it. Now, I read this, Candy and Beverly, those of you, and Joyce, those of you that know what's been going on in the church, because there's a big argument in the Methodist church that some are wanting to rewrite the scriptures, and some says you can't do this. But there are those that want to and said, well, it isn't relevant to today. I beg your pardon. All right? And so we're getting to this. It says, if anyone takes words away from this book of prophecy, God will take away from him his share in the tree of life and in the holy city, which are described in this book. In other words, whatever you do, don't take anything, don't rewrite it. Don't make it to sound like you want to go. I was just reading, and I'm going to preach about it for the Sunday of August the 2nd, where there's a particular fellow named Paulus, P-A-U-L-U-S, who's a professor that is really way out there wanting to take things out, and I'll mention him in the sermon, but anyway, we get there. But I think about it, as I was studying this, I think, well, Paulus, you're trying to rewrite the Bible, and he says you can't do that. So at least that's the way my reading is, isn't it yours?
Yeah.
And then he says, he who testifies to this thing says, yes, I'm coming soon. I am coming soon. Amen. And then there's, how many of these Bibles have the word Maranthia in it?
Corinthia?
M-A-R-A-N-A-T-H-A. You know what that means?
No.
That means, come, Lord Listen to how the Bible ends. Can you imagine this? The Bible ends with the word grace. The very ending of it all. And you realize in that verse, there comes the glory, come what may. John, in essence, was sure of the grace of the Lord Jesus Christ. You see, he thought Christ was going to come. It didn't happen in his time. And he was looking for a speedy return. The hope that John was reaching for was never realized in the way in which he expected to realize it. But you and I can never doubt that through Christ, or though Christ did not visibly return for John to see him, all right? He nevertheless abundantly kept his promise. And John has written us that he would be with his own even to the end of the earth, end of the world, right? And so here comes the glory. Come what may, John was sure of the grace of God and through Jesus Christ. And he was equally sure that the grace was sufficient for all things. And it's surely symbolic, and it is certainly fitting that the last word of the Bible is grace. Thoughts? Now we've gone through the pathos, we've gone through the glory, and all of a sudden, we've gone through the terrible persecutions, we've gone through everything that John was writing about. And what do we hear? Grace. Lord Jesus Christ, be with God's.
Our reward.
Maggie, what?
Our reward.
That is our reward, yes, it most certainly is our reward, and it's there. Revelations is above all, I think, a book of hope. I want us to realize that. It also shows us that no matter what happens on earth, God is in control. I know we feel that not there right now through this pandemic, through the chaos that's going through our world, through all of the destruction, through all the riotings, through all of the unrest, but God is in control, and it promises the evil will not last forever. That's the promise. And when you not think about it, when you read the book of Revelations and the final ending of it, it depicts the wonderful reward that you spoke about that is waiting for all of us who believe in Jesus Christ as Savior and Lord. Hope you've enjoyed it. Good seeing you.
I just wonder why it's so difficult for us.
Well, that's a good question. Goldie asked is, just why is it so difficult to understand? Think about even the parts of the Bible that you and I see before we got into the book of Revelation. Even though you and I read the four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and we know they tell the story about Christ's time here on earth, when he looked like us, when he was part of us. There's parts of that, Goldie, that to me, I still don't understand. And it gets to the point was, you and I have to accept it on faith. That's where it comes to. And that's where it comes to. It's sort of like years ago, you realize that, and I was talking, some of you are going to hear the sermon, I was talking about the BitFit, the Fitbit that fits on your arm, tells you how you sleep, or you can put an hour ring on your finger and it'll tell you what goes on, and the technology is all of that. You see, I'm one of these individuals. Do you realize what has been developed in our lifetime? Do you realize, my friend was having his surgery done on his foot, and he said, Bob, they got a wound vac in here. Well, you know what a wound vac is? A wound vac, Candy does, and Joyce does. A wound vac is put into the wound, and it sucks everything out. It keeps it healing, all right? I can remember when that wasn't around, all right? And I can see the things. And now we've got this watch that fits on us and tells us how we slept and all this. You realize the marvelous thing about it is, to me, and this is what I find even more so, that as we gain the ability to use the knowledge God gives it to us to use it in things that we need to do. And it's like, it's been 30 years since I've been in surgery, all right? But think about what, I saw miraculous things occur 30 years ago in surgery, and now think about what's occurring in surgery today, or even in the hospital, or even with people with the corona, like for Missy's up there with corona pneumonia, Mike and Mike's daughter. But we've got ways of correcting all of that. And I remember when I used to sell oxygen concentrator. And how many of you know that, you get on one of those and you've got a 100-foot tube and you go anywhere in your house with them and all this sort of thing. And you realize what they've done with that? Well, for instance, I've been on a CPAP now for quite a few years, right? Guess what? I've got a CPAP now that's about this big.
Yeah.
And it doesn't need water. It has the capabilities of pulling the moisture out of the air and the moisture from your breath to put it back into you so that you don't have a dry day. When I look at it, all of a sudden, our knowledge, and we're able to gain, and we're able to do things, and I'm just sitting there going, hallelujah. Give God the glory, because God is saying to all of us, this is His grace to all of us. Yeah, we're going to still die. We're going to have people die from things that are tragic. But guess what? If you've got Christ in your heart and in your life, you're going to be in a better place than you are now. It's hard to imagine that, but that's exactly what the book of Revelation says to you and me, because we receive the grace. And grace is what? It's unearned, unmerited reward from God.
Absolutely.
Revelation's hard to understand because it's symbolic. They don't really say what they mean. We've got to go around the world to figure out what it is they're saying. That's true.
Yeah.
Well, I hope you've had fun with the book of Revelation. We're going to take a sabbatical. We're going to break away for a while, not long. We'll come back, and I'll assure you, we will not dig into one as demanding as the book of Revelation.
Deep as.
Oh, thank goodness.
But
But I
have
got a
pretty much-
different
I will not put you in the
perspective of
book
what
of
it is.
Leviticus,
Yeah.
so
Really
you
good.
realize that. Some of you have seen the book of Leviticus. That is not an easy read. It's not an easy study. But we will pull up on something. If you have a particular Bible book of the Bible that you would like to see us look into, please email me. Let me know your thoughts, and we'll look at those. We're going to come back in, God willing, the creek don't rise. We're going to start worship on the 23rd of August here in the Family Life Center in the Great Hall. You shaking your head, but we're going to try our best, all right? You don't have to come. We're going to still put it on Facebook and also on YouTube. But there are those who are wanting to get out. They're wanting to get involved. And it's really and truly gets down to the point is we miss worshiping together. We miss that. That's why you're here. We could all do this from Zoom, and we could be like Roy and Alice. We could be all sitting in the house, but we're not close to each other, all right? But I'm thankful that they can get involved with this, and we can do that.
That could
on
run
Sunday
one.
morning. But I'm going to be starting a whole new series, getting us back. I'm doing something I have never done before. I'm pulling an old series back in and rewriting it. And we're going to do, starting with the 23rd of August, 40 days of prayer. I'm bringing it back. I did it in October of 17, and I was just moved to do it. So I'm in the process of trying to get all that pulled back together again and get it involved. I mentioned it to the relaunch team Sunday, and I got a lot of thumbs up. So I think they realize that we need to be in prayer. And that's prayer is what works. I mean, it's basically,
Absolutely.
you don't realize